Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. Well, we've got the new Punk archetype which has been introduced within the brand new deck build. Yugioh Punk Sharakusei is a level 3 Earth Attribute Psychic type tuner effect monster with 1200 attack and 600 defense. You can use each effect among the first and second effects with this card's name only once per turn. 1. You can pay 600 life points. Fusion summon one Punk fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand and or field as fusion material. 2. During your opponent's turn, as a quick effect, you can pay 600 life points. Immediately after this effect resolves, synchro summon one Punk synchro monster. I like the design on this card because it does have double utility. First, it can be acted as part of the fusion. It helps to stimulate your fusion monsters without requiring you to have like polymerization, which can block, your deck building, or you might draw into multiple copies, which can actually make your hand worse. This, by just giving up 600 life points, lets you just fusion summon both from the hand and from the field, and it can be activated at a point where it doesn't have to be purely from the hand or the field, which some of these types of cards do have that limitation on. Secondary ability is just during your opponent's turn. As a quick effect, paying 600 life points again, you're able to synchro summon a Punk synchro monster. Since this is a tuner, this can actually be used as well. The only thing is you do have to use the monsters from your field, so you are going to have to maybe rely on using one of these effects or not both, unless you can swarm your field with further monsters. My only concern with this type of effect is if your opponent reads this, they're going to know what you're going to do and are going to try and use things to stop this from happening or to get rid of certain cards to prevent this from happening. Gagaku-P.U.N.K is a level 3 Earth Attribute Psychic type tuner monster with 900 attack and 600 defense. You can only use the first and second effects of this card's name once per turn. 1. You can pay 600 life points, add one Punk spell card from your deck to your hand. 2. When a Punk monster you control is targeted for an attack or by an opponent's card effect, as a quick effect you can draw one card. So the first card, again, this is a tuner monster, so I'm hoping there are some non-tuners within this as well. The first ability, paying 600 life points, seems to be a cost that they all have. Everyone has to pay 600 life points to trigger off some effect. And it just searches for one of your Punk spell cards. That's fine as an effect. It adds consistency and it's a decent enough ability depending on what the spell cards do as well. Secondary ability is actually very useful because whenever something happens to be targeted, you just get to draw an additional card. That's always nice if that's from an attack or from a card effect. It might only be a once per turn effect, but if you can keep this out on the field, you can abuse this effect constantly within your turn. No Punk Seaman is a level 3 Earth Attribute Psychic type tuner effect monster with 600 attack and 600 defense. You can only use the first and second effects of this card's name once per turn. 1. You can pay 600 life points, add one Punk monster from your deck to your hand, except no Punk Seaman. 2. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target one Punk monster you control. It gains 600 attack. Much like the other ones, it's a pay 600 life points. This one searches for your Punk monsters, which just again adds to consistency. The secondary ability, if it's sent to the graveyard, you just get to boost one of your Punk monsters by 600 attack. It looks to be a permanent boost because it doesn't say until the end of this turn or until the end of your opponent's turn, so I'm guessing that is a permanent effect. It being a tuner monster and is used as a part of material for a synchro summon means it'll be sent to the graveyard even just by doing that. Either condition is not difficult to meet. At the moment, from what we're seeing, they are very weak, the 3 first monsters, and I'm hoping we get some more impressive support as we go down the line. No Punk Foxy Tune is a level 8 Light Attribute Beast type effect monster with 2300 attack and 2600 defense. You can only use the first and second effects of this card's name once per turn. 1. You contribute one Punk monster, special summon this card from your hand. 2. You can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard, send one card from your hand to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon one Punk monster from your deck, except a level 8 monster. And 3. Once per turn, when this card destroys a monster in battle, you can gain life points equal to the original attack of that monster. So for the first effect, it just special summons itself by attributing a Punk monster. That's fine because it doesn't require 2 tributes, and since it's a special summon, you still have your normal summon for the rest of that turn. As for the second effect, I am a little confused about how relevant that effect is. Yes, you do send this card and another card from your hand to the graveyard in exchange to summon another punk monster, but it has to be anything other than a level 8 monster. My concern with that at the moment is none of the other monsters that are level 3 have over 1,000 attack points, which means unless you're using it for a synchro summon or for a fusion summon, those cards are pretty weak, or if you're using them for their search abilities. Third effect I think is quite unique as well. There are a few monsters that do have this type of ability, but they're not very commonly introduced within mainstream archetypes these days, to be able to recover life points equal to the original attack of that monster. That means consistently you can gain life points without having to run specific types of support, but it's a once per turn effect, and it's only whenever this card actually successfully destroys a monster in battle. If your opponent has cards that protect it, stop your battle phase, or put you in a situation where this card ends up, the card ends up being sent to the graveyard by other means, then you don't get this type of bonus. I'd also argue that for its stat lineup, 2300 attack isn't impressive for a level 8. Yugioh Carp Rising is a level 8 water attribute fish type fusion effect monster with 1000 attack and 2600 defense. It requires 2 punk monsters as its materials. You can only use the first and second effects of this card's name once per turn. 1. You contribute this fusion summon card, special summon up to 2 punk monsters with different names except level 8 monsters from your hand or deck in defense position. And 2. If this card used as material for a synchro summon, you can target 1 punk monster you control. This turn it can attack twice during each battle phase. Considering this is the only fusion monster they've shown so far, this is by no means impressive. 1000 attack and 2600 defense. It's a very defensive card and it's not really that usable. Materials are very limited. 2 punk monsters, so it's actually very easy to summon, but why would you summon this? When it's summoned, you just get to tribute it to special summon 2 punk monsters. They can't even be your big one. They can't be the big effect monster level 8 that you've got. So you can use the other ones as, part of a synchro summon or, again, for a fusion summon if you want to. And this secondary ability just gives your synchro monster the chance to attack twice during each battle phase, which is a decent enough effect because it can be used against your opponent's monsters or as a direct attack as well. But it's only for the turn. I wish it had actually just been permanent, because that way it could have been useful. Yugioh Amazing Dragon is a level 11 wind attribute sea serpent type synchro effect monster with 3000 attack and 2800 defense. Materials are 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner monsters. You can only use 1 effect among the first and second effects of this card's name per turn. 1. If this card is synchro summoned, you can target a number of cards your opponent controls, up to the number of level 3 psychic monsters with different names in your field and graveyard. Return them to the hand. 2. You can target 1 punk monster in your graveyard, except Yugioh Amazing Dragon, and special summon it. I'm really confused about what this deck is trying to do. If anyone actually knows, please leave those down in the comments below. It's got so many weird archetypes and attributes and, names and types within it. It just seems to be splash mismatch of everything. The requirements on this card aren't difficult, because if you've got the level 8 out, you've got the level 3 out, you can synchro summon it easily, so it does gain that attack twice during this turn effect from the fusion monster, or even from your effect monster as well, because those are both level 8. The summoning requirement on this is really easy. 3000 attack points for a level 11 is a bit weak, I'd say. I would have liked to have seen it as 3500 or maybe slightly more. The first effect, being able to send cards your opponent controls back to the hand is like having multiple versions of compulsory evacuation device, which is fine depending on how many level 3 monsters you've got. I think because you've got 3 with different names, that's the maximum you can actually go with at the moment. Maybe when we get some more support in the future, it will be able to work a little bit better, and it's meant to try and clear it. I liken it a bit to Karunratne, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, but then again that was nerfed, and I think this can only activate this effect when it's synchro summoned to begin with. So unless you can do this multiple times, you can really only rely on this maybe happening once or twice within a duel. Secondary ability is actually quite useful because you just special summon a punk monster from the graveyard, and it's not limited to what you can choose. It can be any of them outside of itself, so you do have some recovery. Gagaku-P.U.N.K Wild Picking is a continuous spell card with the effect. You can use the first effect with this card's name only once per turn. 1. At the start of the damage step, if your Punk monster is battling an opponent's monster, you can destroy that opponent's monster. 2. If this card in its owner's spell and trap zone is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can activate this effect. For the rest of this turn, Punk monsters you currently control cannot be destroyed by battle. The first effect is actually really decent because this happens whenever your Punk monster is battling an opponent's monster, so it can be both on your turn and your opponent's, if you're attacking with your monster into an opponent's, or vice versa when your opponent's monster attacks into yours. It's an instant destruction and it happens at the start of the damage step, so before any interactions within your monsters, so you're not losing your monster as well. The secondary ability is also quite usable because this does provide you with protection from being destroyed in battle for that turn. It might not seem like a good effect, but at least it will protect you for the turn, and then you're able to go off with your players during your next turn. Gagaku-P.U.N.K Crusher Beat is a continuous spell card with the effect. You can only use the first effect with this card's name only once per turn. 1. If your opponent activates a card or a card effect that targets a Punk monster in your possession, you can target one card your opponent controls, destroy it. 2. If this card in its owner's spell and trap zone is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can activate this effect. For the rest of this turn, Punk monsters you currently control cannot be targeted by or destroyed by your opponent's card effects. This works as kind of the opposite as the continuous spell card of the battle version. Instead, when this happens to have cards that activate and target a Punk monster, you're able to just destroy one of your opponent's monsters. It's a decent effect. The secondary ability does provide some immunity for your Punk monsters to be protected from card effects for the rest of the turn. It's nice to have both effects, but you're unlikely to have both effects working at the same time, which is that kind of sweet spot you're looking for. Jururi-P.U.N.K Dangerous Gabu is a normal trap card with the effect. You can activate a card with this card's name only once per turn. 1. Target one effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effects for the rest of the turn, then if you control a Punk monster, gain life points equal to the targeted monster's original attack. This is quite decent because this does negate one of your opponent's monster's effects. If you know what they're running and how they're running their deck, you can stop them from going into multiple plays by stopping one monster. It does then have the benefit of giving you life points if you happen to have a Punk monster present on your field. And the final card they have is Jururi-P.U.N.K Nashiwari Surprise. This is a normal trap card with the effect. You can activate a card with this card's name only once per turn. 1. Target one face-down card your opponent controls, or if you control a Punk monster, you can target one face-up card your opponent controls, destroy it. This just acts as a bit of a mystical Space Typhoon type of effect, or as a Nobleman or Crossout if you prefer, because it happens to be able to target either a face-down card or a face-up one. It depends on whether you have a Punk monster present or not. It's fine for an effect, but it's nothing groundbreaking. I still am very confused about what this deck is trying to do. It's trying to do so many things within so many different arenas, and generally speaking, I am very confused about what you're actually going to do with it. You've got monsters that are able to search for other monsters, you've got monsters that can search for spell cards, you've got monsters that can let your synchro monster attack twice, you've got a monster that has... The synchro monster has the ability to compulsory evacuation device. Some of your opponent's cards, depending on how many level 3 psychic monsters you've got in the field and in the graveyard. You've got a protection card from battle, protection card from card effects, a destruction card from, some sort of effect, and then you've got a life point gain effect / negation effect. This archetype is so... it doesn't know what it's trying to be. It's trying to be a bit of everything, a jack of all trades and a master of none. That is my assessment of it. And until Konami really puts a stamp on what the direction is for it, I don't think anyone's going to understand its value. I'm sure there is probably plenty of it. I'm just very confused, and please, if you know any better, leave those in the comments down below. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe for more daily Yu-Gi-Oh content.